and welcome back. My name is V, and today we're going to watch a video that I contemplated making myself, but I respect Final Fantasy Union a lot and they do fantastic content, so I figured might as well hear what they have to say about this topic, react to it, and discuss it with you. The video is called The Uncertain Road Ahead for Final Fantasy. And this might not just apply to Final Fantasy XIV, but as you know, this channel was made out of love for Final Fantasy XIV in particular. And there are a lot of things that I want to say about Final Fantasy XIV, especially now that I have finished the MSQ for 7.0 and 7.1. You can currently see the MSQ videos rolling out on the channel. Even though I'm done with it, you haven't seen all of my reactions and thoughts on it yet, but I have a lot to share, so hopefully you'll be enjoying that as well over the next few weeks. When it comes to FF14 in general, there's going to be quite a few videos where I will talk about everything concerning the story, Wuklamot, and other things that I simply cannot stay quiet about. Now, this video, I have my assumptions on what it's going to talk about. I am assuming that this is Final Fantasy XIV related, but as a largely FF14 and World of Warcraft channel, I almost feel like it's my duty to start talking about this, as pretty much every content creator worth their salt out there is having their thoughts and opinions that I've been avoiding because I didn't want my own opinion on FF14 MSQ to be tainted by that. So now that I'm done, I'm ready to join the discussion and see what everyone else has to say about it. If you happen to be new here on the channel, make sure to subscribe, leave the video a like for some good luck, and let me know in the comments how you feel about Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy XIV in general these days. Are you happy with Dawntrail's MSQ? Do you still play FF14? And what do you do in-game? Now let's watch the video.
Over the past few years, the first video we published in each calendar year has almost always been an exciting look forward at what we can hope to expect from Final Fantasy. But this year feels different. For what seems like decades now, there has almost always been some kind of release looming on the horizon, whether that be a mainline entry or supporting property, a high-profile spin-off, or an expansion. We were spoiled with just how much Final Fantasy there was on the table. Between 2010 and 2013, for example, we had the releases of Final Fantasy XIII and XIV, Dissidia Duodecim, the Japanese launch of Type 0, and the hope it would be localized, Final Fantasy IV The Complete Collection, Theatrhythm, Final Fantasy XIII-2 and XIV A Realm Reborn, and Bravely Default as a nice adjacent property. Countless other games were also released during this period, such as Airborne Brigade and Chocobo's Chocoto Farm, and when combined, it meant 51 unique properties related to Final Fantasy were brought to market during just a 3-year period. There came an appreciation, however, that quantity was not a substitute for quality, and when Yosuke Matsuda replaced Yuichi Wada, he set out to significantly reduce how many Final Fantasy games were released, with the hope of increasing the wider perception of the brand. This saw the average number of Final Fantasy games released per year fall from 12.75 down to just 4 in 2020, and last year there were only 3 properties released: Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Final Fantasy XVI The Rising Tide, and Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail.
As someone who has played all 3 titles, I have to say that I understand their vision of producing quality over quantity, but considering just how many issues there were with Final Fantasy XVI, and I know that I'm about to fall on my own sword here, but with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as well, and especially Final Fantasy XIV lately with Dawntrail, I think that unfortunately the main thing that they were trying to achieve wasn't achieved here. And this whole year, for me at least, was pretty much me being hyped about FF14 and FF releases in general, and then just slowly migrating towards Persona games. And lately, I've been playing almost nothing but Persona. My last year was Persona 3 Reload, into Persona 4 Golden, into Persona 5 Royale, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and then ended the year with Metaphor ReFantazio. And that says a lot for someone who it was completely new to Persona franchise and completely fell in love with the franchise because I had the time, because I wasn't as occupied with some of the games that I thought I would be fully occupied and immersed with. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but for me at least, it gave me the opportunity to grow my other YouTube channel, VEE Plays, where I do all of my Persona and other RPG content. And it's a little unfortunate for my FF14 content, but it's difficult to feel passionate about something that lately hasn't been giving me a lot of reasons to remain passionate about it. And I'll talk about it over the next few videos and maybe even today. But I just wanted to set that premise as we continue to watch.
It means that we now find ourselves in a strange situation. As we look ahead, there are no confirmed original properties scheduled to release in 2025 or beyond. And the things we do know about are the final part in a trilogy that has yet to formally be announced and may not arrive for another 2 to 4 years, and the next expansion in an MMO that also has not been formally announced and likewise probably won't arrive for another 2 to 3 years. That's not to say things aren't happening, however. So, within this video, we're going to talk about what we do know before delving into some speculation. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had a very successful launch last year, at least from a critical perspective. It received incredible scores from critics all around the world, and has received over 30 commendations at Game of the Year awards, a feat only surpassed by Astrobot. Thus far, however, Square Enix has yet to reveal any kind of global sales figures around the game. The only thing we know is that when combined with Final Fantasy XVI and the countless other games released by Square Enix during the previous fiscal year, the HD games segment collectively did not manage to reach profitability and suffered an operating loss of over $50 million. To try and counteract this, Square Enix has embarked on an aggressive multi-platform strategy, and the latest step in this strategy will be seen on the 23rd of January when Final Fantasy VII Rebirth launches on PC. This, of course, was always planned before the new strategy was put in place, as Final Fantasy VII Remake also launched on PC.
As someone who completely understands the loyalty of Square Enix towards PlayStation, I do think that these steps need to be implemented way earlier, because exclusivity in a way kills the hype not just for players but for content creators as well. Let's imagine a situation where some content creators are PC content creators exclusive, which sounds unlikely at first because you'd think that everyone who does this as a business would also own a PlayStation 5, but that's not necessarily the case for someone who is at the beginning of their content creation career or just hasn't been focusing on PlayStation or PlayStation 5 titles at all. And they miss out on a huge window of opportunity where they get to be there on day one of launch. Now, of course, they can be there on, let's say, 23rd of January for the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth PC release, but it's just not the same metrics-wise. And to be on top of all of the opportunities, you simply have to own all of the modern consoles to be pretty much ready for anything, which is a little bit unfortunate from the content creators' standpoint, but from the players, it also is that way. Because even though people want to play the games that they want to play, they're also largely influenced by what's trending. So if a certain game doesn't feel like it's trending anymore because everybody seems to have played it, even though a lot of people don't own the PlayStation 5 and haven't played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a large majority who hasn't played it simply doesn't talk about it anymore, and that makes it somewhat less likely for a person to purchase the game if they're not truly passionate about it, because a staggering amount of people simply follow the trends, and that is something that can affect the sales later on as well if the gap between the original release on a specific console and then a release on all the other consoles is too big.
But it's more the speed of the port that stands out. Despite the exclusivity agreements not lasting anywhere near as long, Final Fantasy VII Remake took 14 months to appear on PC, and Final Fantasy XVI took 15 months. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth only had a 3-month exclusivity window, but the port will be arriving less than 12 months after its release. And not only that, it's set to come with some significant enhancements. According to the specifications, the game can reach up to 120 frames per second and will come with some huge enhancements to general graphics and lighting. To try and sweeten the deal, anyone who pre-orders the game ahead of its release will also get 30% off the recommended retail price. Let's just hope that the port arrives in a very playable state, unlike 7 Remake, which featured in our previous video about some of the worst ports in the history of the franchise. Of course, now that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has been out for almost a year, thoughts have already started to move on to the third installment in the trilogy. Naoki Hamaguchi, the director of Rebirth, has spoken about his desire to have Part 3 release sooner rather than later. And with the PC port coming out in record time and no downloadable content being produced for the specific objective of not impeding development on Part 3, the educated guess is that it will arrive towards the start of 2027, 3 years after Rebirth. If that is indeed the intended release window, then there's an outside chance that Part 3 might be officially unveiled this year. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example, was unveiled at the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary livestream, which aired 20 months before the game shipped. But while we wait for news on Part 3 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, Ever Crisis will continue to plug along. Throughout 2024, it found a dedicated global community, and in Japan at least, it earned approximately $25 million. This represents modest returns, but it's around half of what Brave Exvius and War of the Visions earned during their first full calendar years on the market. Regardless, 2025 is sure to have plenty of collaborations in store, as well as a continuation of Sephiroth's backstory. On the subject of Brave Exvius, the global version was shut down towards the end of 2024, but as yet, there appears to be no signs that the Japanese version will suffer the same fate. War of the Visions should also continue to see content produced throughout 2025, but given that Square Enix seems to be cutting away all of the deadwood in its mobile catalogue, we may see the global version suffer a similar fate. For reference, Square Enix shut down numerous properties last year in addition to the global version of Brave Exvius. Triple Triad, for example, was removed from the Final Fantasy Portal app, but they also shut down Engage Kill, Full Metal Alchemist Mobile RPG, Dragon Quest Champions and Dragon Quest Keshi Keshi, and Towa.
Just as a fun fact, I've recently started watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood on my new reaction channel, VEE Reacts. You can find a link in the description, by the way. And I did not know that Square Enix was working on Full Metal Alchemist, which I, as someone who's enjoyed a lot of Square Enix titles, see this as a little bit of a personal flaw. And it was kind of a nice feeling of familiarity to start watching a new anime and see Square Enix in the list of developers. It was quite nice.
Guy. Square Enix also transferred ownership of Octopath Traveler, Champions of the Continent, to NetEase, who were previously responsible for managing the game's operations in Southeast Asia and China. Sticking with the theme of mobile and China, it was revealed back in August that Square Enix had gained approval to release a previously unannounced mobile version of Final Fantasy XIV in the region, which was tentatively dubbed Final Fantasy XIV Crystal World. Square Enix then announced the game officially in November as a free-to-play iteration of the venerable MMO that has been custom-built from the ground up for the platform. The game is not being worked on by Square Enix directly though, instead it's being developed by Lightspeed Studios who have officially licensed the property. However, it is noted that employees from Square Enix are supervising the project. Lightspeed revealed that they pitched the idea to Yoshida 5 years ago, and this was no doubt part of the strategic venture that Square Enix signed with Tencent back in 2018. So far, no release date or release window has been specified, but the team did note that they have already been working on the game for years. Closed beta tests are already underway, with numerous videos being released online from those who are taking part. Should tests go well, then they plan to launch the game in mainland China first, before making further adjustments ahead of its global launch outside of China. We should therefore expect to hear much more about this throughout 2025, and if things go well, then hopefully it should launch in both China and the rest of the world this year. Last but not least, we then have Final Fantasy XIV itself. Ever since the release of Heavensward, Final Fantasy XIV has been on a prominent upward trajectory. Heavensward received an OpenCritic of 85, and each subsequent expansion improved on the last, culminating in Endwalker receiving a 93. Dawntrail, though, only managed to score an 81, which was lower than A Realm Reborn when it launched over 10 years ago. The team at Creative Studio 3 are undeterred, however, and have been pumping out a steady release of content to try and keep active players engaged. In 2025, this will see the launch of patch 7.16 on the 21st of January, just a few days before the launch of Rebirth on PC. Patch 7.2, which promises to be much more substantial, should then launch towards the end of Q1, but its timing suggests that they are sticking with the Endwalker patch schedule as opposed to the pre-Endwalker patch schedule, and if that's the case, we shouldn't expect to hear anything about the next expansion until 2026. It means that right now, the only properties that exist, or will exist, relate to either Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy XIV, or Brave Exvius. There are some promising unknowns, however, and in that regard, we need to go back to Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered. Out of the two remaining projects that featured in the infamous Nvidia leak, Tactics Remastered seems to be the more plausible of the two. Naoki Yoshida has a huge amount of respect for Yasmin.
I've never played Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's been hugely requested on my stream and on VPlay's YouTube as well. And this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, but with the rumors of Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, I've been kind of holding off on emulating anything, as that would be the only way for me to play it. But I would be very excited for it.
Matsuno, the director of the original Tactics, and they have since worked together on Final Fantasy XIV. Square Enix have also released Tactics Ogre Reborn, a faithful adaptation of another of Matsuno's prior works that came with a host of quality of life adjustments. And in more recent times, Yoshida teamed up with Hironobu Sakaguchi to publish an enhanced console port of Fantasian, dubbed Fantasian Neo Dimension. The interesting twist in this particular story, however, is that Yoshida also went on record a few months ago when being interviewed by Japanese publication 4Gamer. It was a wide-ranging discussion, but Yoshida noted that he would love to see Vagrant Story and Tactics re-released at some point, and that's about as compelling as things can get without Square Enix making an official announcement. The Final Fantasy IX remake, unfortunately, has not been given the same treatment. After what felt like a slew of leaks and rumours, everything appears to have gone cold. And the other somewhat unrelated hurdle is that the Final Fantasy IX anime has also got into some trouble. Back in October, it was reported that Cyber Group Studios, the company that had been working on an adaptation of Final Fantasy IX in collaboration with Square Enix, was suffering from significant financial troubles. That then escalated in December, with numerous studios bidding to acquire Cyber Group Studios and its individual.
As I'm playing through Final Fantasy IX for the first time now, and I'm trying not to see the cutscenes and everything due to spoilers.
Contracts. Amongst this, it was revealed that Newen Studios was attempting to acquire the rights to the Final Fantasy IX animated series, with it speculated that this would be passed to its Blue Spirit production house, which was responsible for the likes of Blue Eye Samurai and Mini Ninjas, which was produced in collaboration with Cyber Group Studios based on the IP when it was owned by Square Enix. Needless to say, things have become quite messy. Based on this, it's unclear if we'll hear anything about projects related to Final Fantasy IX in 2025, but there's always hope. Beyond that, however, we're just going into wild speculation territory. For example, it's safe to assume that Final Fantasy XVII is at least currently being thought about, as it's already been 18 months since the release of Final Fantasy XVI. For example, even though there were 4 years between the release of Final Fantasy XV and the announcement of Final Fantasy XVI, planning had been well underway for years by that point. But outside of the next main numbered entry, it's unclear what other directions the Final Fantasy franchise may go in. Some projects may have been part of Takeshi Kiryu's massive cull, but with a huge decrease in scope around the franchise in the past 4 to 5 years, we just have to hope that whatever does manifest will be of the highest quality. With that though, we hope you've enjoyed our short look ahead for the Final Fantasy franchise. Based on what we discussed, which of the known projects are you most looking forward to? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and make sure to also let us know your hopes and dreams for the franchise too. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, as irrespective of what games are planned to release, we have plenty of exciting projects in the works. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, The Livestream, and Zukan TDK, who are super special Onion Eye supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.
So, I'd like to talk about this a little bit and to focus especially on FF14. Now, when it comes to my channel and how it, well, not started, because I used to do World of Warcraft content way before I started FF14, but my channel gained a lot of attention through FF14, and I feel like I was in the right place at the right time. And now with FF14, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And I think that I've found myself in a situation that a lot of other content creators, specifically for 14, have found themselves in. So I think that it's a scary situation to be relying on the success of the franchise to basically be growing your business. I've had to find other ways to grow my content that don't just rely on Final Fantasy XIV, as 14, with the release of Shadowbringers and then Endwalker, and with the combination of COVID and everything that's happened, whoever was there in the right place at the right time. And I am not often in the right place at the right time. This time I was. But later on, it was up to the content creators to either make it or break it. So I turned to variety as a way to continue to make content that I felt people actually cared about after the good part of the Final Fantasy XIV MSQ has ended. And I don't regret my decision. But I've also recently started doing something else with me playing through Persona games for the first time. I've also started to learn my first speedrun, which is the Persona 3 Reload. And I am not at the end of the journey, not even close. But I am enjoying it a lot, and I'm adding that as a piece of content, as a combination, and I guess a supplementary type of content that I make that doesn't just rely on one game. As Final Fantasy XIV taught me a valuable lesson that we as content creators can't rely on the success of a game. And seeing this kind of video makes me realize that it just confirms what we already know, is that even when things are quiet, as a creator, you just have to find other ways to keep going and to keep growing, or at least maintaining yourself. And it's concerning that some of these titles have had less than desirable sales. 16, FF7, Rebirth due to console exclusivity, and then Final Fantasy XIV losing an amount of players or not having enough people subscribed. That's all money. And where is the money for the new projects and new games exactly coming from? We as players are expecting quality, we are expecting standards to be met, we're expecting all of these good things and some sort of masterpiece to revitalize the hype for Final Fantasy. but also the support has not been great, and this is not due to us. We vote with our wallets, and we don't need to purchase anything that we don't want to purchase just because it would support the company in hopes of creating a better product. And Square Enix admittedly has been put into a little bit of an awkward situation where now they have to come up with a really good title and a really good game to make sure that people still see the Final Fantasy franchise the way they used to, but with reduced resources. And this happens when you get a little prideful, when you get a little sloppy, when some things that players would expect aren't met, or when there's an exclusivity on release, or when some standards aren't met. It does result in reduced sales, and I think that right now, I would imagine that things have gone a little quiet, but that is all hands on deck with thinking about the next Final Fantasy XIV expansion, even possibly Kingdom Hearts, and other things like Final Fantasy XVII and Final Fantasy Rebirth Part 3. So, regardless of how many resources are being put into these games, people still expect a lot of these games because Final Fantasy as a franchise still carries some value and still has a ring to it. And I think that I want to believe that these standards are going to be met. As for me, as a content creator, this simply means that I will have to focus a lot harder on maintaining myself as a content creator through all these different ways without focusing on just FF14. So I have different YouTube channels, multiple YouTube channels at this point, that focus on different things. VEE Plays, which is my, I call it my baby channel, it's slowly surpassing this VEE Plays MMO in views and engagement, and pretty much everything else but the subscribers, as that's something that is still growing quite steadily, but it's becoming my main source of traction at this point, as I've turned to variety, Atlas games, Persona, and other projects as well. Other Final Fantasy games also that I don't cover here on the VEE Plays MMO. So you can find all of them and my playthroughs and my thoughts and everything on VEE Plays. So that's pretty much my thoughts on it. I am a little concerned, but hopeful, and I'm hoping that during the summer festivals and other opportunities to announce games that we will see at least some announcements on the new Kingdom Hearts, something regarding Rebirth plans. We're not going to hear about Final Fantasy XIV expansion for a very long time, but I am hopeful that over time we are going to get some sort of an idea of what we can expect, at least through the FF14 MSQ. Do stay tuned, as over the coming weeks I will be uploading all of my MSQ videos from Dawntrail, and regardless of your opinion, I think that this time around Neon Genesis, my partner, and I have provided something quite valuable. We played through the expansion together, and we gave plenty of thoughts on pretty much everything regarding FF14, so you can find that here on the channel as well. And I'm working on reviews that are not just overall game reviews, but reviews on specific characters, specific game systems, and other things. So I hope you'll enjoy those as well. Let me know your thoughts on this video, and thanks again to Final Fantasy Union for putting an incredible amount of effort into their content. If you haven't subscribed to their channel as well, make sure to do so. And I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.